At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you are on Circle, Facebook, or Patreon. Thank you for everything, but all of you, especially all of you right now who are watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. I wouldn't be able to do everything I do if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you so very much. It is October 28th, 2024. We're just a few days away from Halloween, man. Like, this month has been going by so fast. And actually, if you remember, back in September, probably the second week of September, I ended up putting up an episode, and I did an open mic live where I mentioned I am going to be on a back-to-back trips until probably the middle of November. And we are almost there. I've got 3 trips left. I am fresh back from Nina, Mexico, or Nena, Mexico. I was out there as their keynote speaker, and it was amazing. It was so much fun out there. Thank you to all of you for being there, for coming up afterwards, and got to take pictures with folks. I was giving out I Am 911 pins, and just a lot of people that were inspired to now also share their stories, because in Mexico and the Latin Americas, others that were represented there was Costa Rica, Paraguay, and Panama. The culture is a bit different. It's not the way it is in the States and other parts of the world, where people are starting to talk more and more and more. So to be up there to share my story and some of the calls that I've taken, and how we are sharing stories and just building a different culture of understanding, and also of the power of storytelling, they were blown away. And there's a lot of work to be done, and I am just honored to be able to assist them with a lot of this as well. So look out for some big things, and a lot of folks from Mexico and the Latin Americas as well that want to be on the podcast to share their stories. So again, look out for that. Thank you again, Nena Mexico, for everything. And I'm just humbled and honored, and thank you for your trust in me to help you all share your stories out there to literally the world. And it's just been an amazing experience. I don't take it lightly. It's been awesome. I never thought all of this was going to happen when I first started this back in the podcast 2013, but even before that, the very first version of everything that I do in 2010. And really the transition to sharing my own stories around 2007 and on. And holy moly, that was a long time ago. And you can tell by all the gray that I have on my face. So yes. But again, the mission remains the same: how one voice can change the world. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about all of you. So thank you for everything that you do and the power that you have in your stories and your voice. Thank you for everything. I'm excited for this episode today. I was just talking with my guest. We were just getting prepped up and everything. And here we go. So, my guest today is Suzanne, and she's a 911 professional and owner at Finding Your Path Coaching. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me and giving this opportunity. It's great. I share you with the gray hairs. They've been well earned.
Right. That is experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. I dig it. Like I've had a few folks that are like, man, you got some gray going on there. I'm like, yep, that's experience.
Yep.
I dig it. Like I'm looking forward to just full on gray and just looking awesome. So I welcome it. I welcome it.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on what you said in your intro there, that it is an honor to be able to share our stories, right? And to be able to be a space where people can come to us with their stories. Like, and that safety that you provide is just, thank you for providing that. It's a great service you're doing. So yeah,
Well,
thank you.
I appreciate it very, very much, and the work that you're doing as well that we're gonna get to later on in this episode. I can't wait to hear more about it. But also, it comes from a lot of experience, as we were talking with with the gray and everything, but our journey as it is. And I always tell people, there are a lot of things that we go through that end up bringing us to where we're at and helping kind of create the person that we have become. And sometimes you have to overcome a lot of difficult things. There's also sometimes you have to go back to basics in order to be able to move forward. And I think all of us in one way or another have been there. But to start at the beginning,
Yeah.
how did you get involved to begin with? Because you've been in public safety, you've been doing this for about 18 years, right?
Yeah, so I've been out of it for a while now, but I started back in 1999. So I forgot to double check with you. Can we mention the agencies we worked?
Of course. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
Excuse me, I did forget to ask you that question. So I started with Toronto Police, and they were very customer service oriented. So I started before there was I'm not sure if there are in the States or not, but in Canada, there's a few colleges that offer communications programs and that for people who want to go into public safety, and that those came around, I don't know, I'm going to say about 2001 or so, 2002, they started kind of coming out. So, but Toronto Police is where I started. They had a huge what they wanted was people who had customer service experience, because that was their standing. And I think justifiably so. Like, if you have somebody who's calling for an emergency or even a non-emergency, like, you're their point of answering, right? And it's customer service based. You want to be able to provide that to the person calling in. So I started with them. I was there for 6 years. 2005, I went to Mississauga Fire, and I spent most of the rest of my career there. I didn't know anything about 911, really, other than you'd learned in school and stuff like that. And I saw the job posting, and everything I read, I was like, okay, I got that. And then radio communications, well, that's the only thing I don't know. So I'm sure I'll figure. Who knew?
Right.
Who knew what the radio communications would end up being? So, so that's kind of, I remember the first time sitting down to listen in, like, because with police, they start you in your call taker training. And then eventually when you complete that, you move into your dispatcher training. And I remember the first time, like, we kind of, as new hires, went up and got to listening in, and the dispatch end, I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to understand anything that's going on here, right? But the year comes along, so that was kind of where I started in the beginning. I was fairly young. I didn't think I was so young then, but I was 25. It was, yeah.
So there are some colleges over here in the States, and also high schools actually now, that are starting classes, or that have classes rather, for communications, for dispatch and call taking and everything. And I love that they're doing a lot of that, because there is more preparation. I remember when I first started, I the same as you. I had no background. Like, I don't have any family that was in dispatch. I have one uncle who was actually he's a former FBI agent, but I didn't I didn't have a lot of contact with him because he lives in Texas. So it wasn't something that I could be like, hey, so how does this work? Do you know any dispatchers or whatever? It was just like that. I had Rescue 911 with William Shatner. Like, that was really the only experience I had for 911. So um going in, it was just getting like thrown into the lions. So, lion's den. So for you, it kind of sounds the same. Like, so you didn't have any family or friends or anything
No.
that were in public safety. You were in college, and you just kind of saw this and was like, this sounds interesting. Let's
Yeah.
try it.
And actually, yeah, I wasn't even in college. I was just working I was at a laundromat at that time. And it was one of the customers that came in.
Yeah.
She'd learned about it from a course she was taking. It was something like a PSA, like learning to care for people with special needs. And
Yeah.
and she'd found out about the job, and she was like, you should try too. And I was like, sure. And who knew?
Right.
Where
Here
I'd
you
be
are, like
25
over
years
eight.
later.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. Toronto Police, like, hats off to them. Their training, even back then, was phenomenal. Like, it was intense. It was, if I remember correctly, 5 weeks in classroom for call taking, and which is probably why, even though I haven't taken a 911 call like for police related stuff in decades, I could still take a suspect description like nobody's business, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah, that stuff doesn't go away either.
no, it doesn't. And yeah, so it was 5 weeks in class, and then 5 weeks with a trainer.
Mhm.
The dispatch end was 10 weeks in class and 5 weeks with a trainer, like on desk. And then, yeah, so, and you had to, they didn't just jump from call taking into dispatching. There was a gap of time, like, to make sure that you had like the one pretty solid under your belt. And yeah, so it's been a while. I'm not exactly sure how quick they move you along now, kind of thing. But I was very lucky to have that experience as far as my training coming into the
Yeah.
job. It really was a great foundation. So
That's
yeah,
pretty awesome then. So for
yeah.
Toronto Police, um, how big was the center, the area that you covered, and also, like, how many people were working at a time? The reason I ask is just so that, for those who are watching and listening can get an idea of how big the area is. Like, my last center, the center that I retired out from, we had 3 people working at a time, but I was just teaching at Raleigh Wake in North Carolina, and they've got like 36 people or so on the floor at a time. So for you, how big was the place, and how many people did you have working at a time?
Yeah. So back then, we had 5 platoons.
Mhm.
We worked days, afternoons, and nights. And it was a 5 week rotation. And I want to say at full complement, we were I think it was about 30 to 35 people per platoon. So yeah, and that like, not everyone, you know what I mean? It was, weren't
Okay.
always, but you didn't
Yeah,
always have that many people on,
right.
but yeah, you easily in the 20s or so of number of people on the floor at any time. I'm not sure how large their staffing would be at this point in
Mhm.
time, like, just because of the growth, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, even the call volume. I remember one of the fire departments I was at, and talking to the EMO gentleman at that time, and he was like, "Well, your old call center you had more dispatchers than there are firefighters in this department." And I was like, "Never thought about it that way." But yeah, like, so, but there's beauties to both sides, right?
Right.
Like, that smaller fire department, to get to know, like, to work with those firefighters, like, and to get to really know them, and that was a different kind of opportunity too. So I've been
Wow.
lucky. I've been lucky to have so many different variances across my career. So yeah.
Was there anything that, I guess, surprised you or even, like, overwhelmed you? Because and the reason I ask too is because, like, when you first walk in to the center and you see everything, especially because yours was a bigger center as well, you see people working like a well-oiled machine, and you've got that thought, like, "Am I gonna be able to do this?"
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and it was, especially geographically, 'cause I grew up in Toronto, so I grew up in South Etobicoke, like, one and so I knew geographically, I knew, like, that area very well. I knew some of the downtown core pretty well. I knew but, to the east was Scarborough was one of the boroughs, and I did not know Scarborough. Like, I did not like, I was just like, "I'm just gonna type exactly what they say." Like,
Yeah.
when you're, like, locating points in that on a map, you're just kind of like, "Woo, connected, nice. I spelled that right," like, so it was, like we did get the chance to, we had to cover our training in each area as well. Um, I I I would like to preface right now, one, because of the time it's been since I was
Mhm.
there, like, there's been changes obviously with, but also and I know we're gonna talk later on about, that I've got a PTSD diagnosis. It
Mhm.
impacts my memory with some terms. So some terms, sometimes I'm like, like, "What was that called again?" Like, what
Right.
right? Like, "What was the rank again?" So, like, time and that sometimes impacted a little bit, but,
Yeah.
yeah, so we had, I can't remember offhand how many divisions right now, but it was a pretty large center. But yeah, when I knew the geographical area, it lifted that kind of ease, so that therefore, your CAD system and the actual operations part of it, you could focus on that versus so it wasn't everything, whew, but
Right, yeah, not all at once, and it's good, of course, that they do it in different stages. Now,
mhm,
one of the things that I always, that I like to ask or hear because I've had that moment, and I think we all have, but when kind of was that moment of realization where it's almost like the veil is pulled back, or almost like the black and white of the beginning of Wizard of Oz to the color, or even the Matrix when you find out what's real? And what I mean is because you're saying that you grew up in the Toronto area, right? So you know what you see and everything. However, when you get into dispatch, that's when you see the real city because there's stuff that you don't know about. There's stuff that you don't know what's going on. And you think, how did I not know this? Or how did I not see this? But now you're in it. You're
yeah.
in the know of like everything that's going on. Did you have kind of that moment of realization? Like, I didn't realize this was the type of stuff that was going on in the city.
It specifically, an apartment that my cousins lived at that we used to go visit all the time. And all of a sudden, like, that was an address that came up a lot. There was a couple of streets over that were not a great neighborhood, but as a kid, or not a great neighborhood. You know what I'm trying to say. But as a
Right.
kid, it was just I was like, we never picked up on any of this. It was just,
Yeah,
it
just
was
that there's
just,
there's more stuff that's going on there, yeah,
yeah,
that you don't know about or you
yeah,
don't see. As
yeah,
they say,
yeah.
ignorance is bliss,
Oh yeah,
right? And
absolutely. Yeah. It's like, maybe I won't turn down this street this time.
right, yeah, no, exactly, and so I saw a meme, it's probably about a year ago now, and I've mentioned it a few times, recently in the podcast, but, like Scooby-Doo, growing up with that cartoon, there's all these monsters, right? But what do we learn at the end? All of these monsters, when they take the mask off, they're all human,
Yeah,
and it's like, "Holy hell."
yeah.
Like that's kind of that as an adult and you see that, you're like, "Oh, man, that's what they were telling us in that cartoon?" We didn't really know, and it's almost the same way in dispatch as well, or especially when you're talking to, those out in the field and they're telling you all these other things, and you're just thinking like, "Wow, there's way more to the world," or even the area that you're in that
Yeah,
than you know. It's a
yeah,
crazy thing.
yeah. I it's funny because I think sometimes we might experience that in life. Like if you think about like when you were a teenager and what you knew to be going on in your high school versus what your parents might have thought was going on in the high school. You know what I
Very
mean?
true.
Like
Yes.
those little.
Yes.
Sometimes you do have that access in different ways. But yeah, it was definitely a different experience once you started working in that area. So
Right. And then you probably have friends or family who would say, "So, what more can you tell me?" You're like,
oh
"Not
yeah,
really much."
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The police just went by. What's happening?
Yeah, you're like, "I don't," like, people would call me all the time. They're like,
Yeah,
"Do you know
yeah,
what's going on at such and such place?" I'm like, "I'm on vacation right now. I have
yeah,
no idea."
yeah,
Or, "It's my day off." Like, "No, I don't know."
yeah.
Oh, man, yeah, the access to information, everyone wants to know what's going on and stuff, and sometimes you just kinda wanna shut it out a little bit because it's too much
Yes.
information, right? There's too much that is going on, so, you get in there, you go through your training and everything. Was there any part of that training where you might have thought, like, "I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it beyond this?" Because like, for me, there was, the call taking piece, but then we immediately went to where we're running warrants, and license plates and everything,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty easy." But also your backup phones and radios. So actually, now, let me rewind. It's actually phones, and then you go to radio because you have to know that radio to work that backup portion. So it was phones to radios, and you would get on there, and then you'd be hearing stuff, and it's just, what do I say? Because you wanna do good, right? So, when you go to respond, I remember I would look at my trainer and I would say, It's just 10-4, right?" And
Yeah.
they would go, "Yeah, Ricardo, just say 10-4."
Yeah. 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 Sometimes we did overthink it, right? Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think the shift when I went from police to fire was probably
Mhm.
the biggest jump in some ways, like of changing, because even the terminology in that, right? Like the way you acknowledge in that, like the 10 codes are more police related versus the fire codes. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that was sometimes their things would slip and they'd be like, yeah, I could tell that she was a police dispatcher. Oh yeah. She's one of the new ones, isn't she? Like,
Right, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and
So
there's always an officer, firefighter, or EMS or whatever who's gonna give you some crap as well a little bit,
yeah.
and, we would have someone who was new on radio. I remember this one specifically, and an officer keyed up and said, like, "Baker 9 radio," and I'm sitting there smiling because I know exactly what they're doing, and the trainee looks over at me, and they're going, "Are they are they talking to me?" And I'd say, "You're on the radio, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, but I thought we were Central."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, we are Central. They're welcoming you in," is basically what they're doing. So just,
So,
you can respond back, "Go ahead," or radio, "Go ahead," however you wanna do it, but there was always a troll who would
yeah.
have to have to do something.
Yep. I remember with the fire department, we had to do with Mississauga Fire, we would do our evening radio checks
Mhm.
and be going through we had the station list and going through the station and um, station 120 was there, but that station wasn't built yet. That was just still on the list. And I'm going through and you're in the zone. And it's like station 119, station 120, station 121. Right. So I
Yeah.
called out this station that didn't exist anymore. And the DC came up later on that night and he's like, I've been driving around all day, but I still can't find this station 120. I'm like, yeah. Thanks for that.
Right, yeah. "Thanks a
Thanks for that.
lot. I
Yeah. But
appreciate it."
yeah.
Thank you for letting me know I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so see, but those I feel like as well, even though, like, at the time, and even thinking back, like, is
Yeah.
that little bit of a jab, a little
Yeah.
dig, but I feel like some of those also kind of broke up
Yeah.
the chaos, right? That can be 911. Like, sometimes you kinda need, even though it can be kind of an asshole thing that someone is doing,
Yeah.
kinda makes you chuckle a little bit, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, they're just trying to, we're having fun here."
Yeah.
And you kinda need some of that sometimes when
Oh
you've got a
yeah.
crap call after crap call, and then something like that happens, or something funny, or even a funny call happens, or outrageous one, you're like, "I needed that."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We I'll tell you this one little quick story and then
Of
we'll
course.
we the whole firefighters, cat up a tree thing, right? All that, like
Oh,
the policy.
yes.
Yeah, like, no, we don't go for that. You ever see a cat skeleton in a tree? No. So one person, I've
True.
been spraying a hose at the cat. It won't come down. Guess why? Would you come into a hose if you were? Anyways.
It's true.
So this woman calls up and she's like, I need the fire department because there was a cat up a tree. And I'm like, okay, we don't give it sometimes. She's like, I understand you don't come for cats up the tree, but my friend went up the tree and now she's stuck. And I'm like, how old is she? So I'm like, we got an exception. We're going out for
How old was she? Do you remember?
She was early 20s because I know the girl calling was just like so like embarrassed. Like she was like, you could almost hear it in her voice. I'm like, she's like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They probably had that moment where the person is stuck up there and saying, you're going to have to call
yeah.
for help because I can't get down now. And
yeah. So exceptions to every rule.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's and there's, as you say that, an exception to every rule. There would be folks that we would have call in for something kind of like that. And we would tell them like, no, they don't really go out to do that, but they were insisting. So we would call over to, have one of the officers call us up on the radio or fire or whichever, or just call us in the center. And they would say, oh yeah, I'll go out there and help them really quick. So then we're like, okay, well, we just told them that we don't really do that, but I love that you're making the exception, but now probably other people are going to call and say, well, I saw this. So now, it's like, you got to do it for everybody now.
Yeah. It's it's that whole customer service thing.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. It's a customer service thing. So, actually, as we're talking about the customer service, and you kind of mentioned this already, but so you had mentioned that you were working in a laundromat, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had a lot of people that would come up and everything as well. So customer service, right? Or even folks that maybe if the money ended up getting eaten by the machine, you've got some angry customers. Do you feel like in any way that job in some way prepared you for what you ended up doing, dealing with people on the phone who might be for needing help?
Yeah. Probably to some extent.
Hmm.
I will say going from being on the phones to then going back to the public facing was a harder transition.
Oh,
Like, because all of a sudden, like people can see my face.
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like every once in a while you'd be taking a call and you're like, and you're doing it and you're like, but I forget that, like, yeah, sometimes you're public facing now. People can see you're trying to offer the customer service, but the voice is a little different than the face. They don't always match.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when I very first started dispatching, I started dispatching in Central Florida at a small police department.
Yeah.
And it was public facing. Like people could walk in and make a complaint right there. And, I could be on the phone with somebody and they would be standing there. And I'm like, hold on just a moment. They're like, yeah, sure. And so they would see things that were going on. And then I would hang up and they'd be like, sounded pretty intense. I'm like, yeah. How can I help you with your bike permit? Or I would go to the bathroom, and I remember this one specifically. I went to the bathroom, came back because I was the only one working. I mean, it was a small police department, so it was one dispatcher on for 8 hours. And I remember coming back, and there was someone standing there, and I said, "How long have you been standing there?" And they just went, "Long enough." And I went, "Oh, great, thank you. Okay, what's your complaint?" And hopefully, it wasn't what you just heard. So switching from that to when I moved back to back home to Southwest Michigan and finished off my career in a central dispatch, we were no longer public facing unless we had like a citizens academy that came in that kind of did a tour or something. Otherwise there was no public that came in. It was just us there all the time. So that was an interesting switch as well. Do you remember any of your other, like earlier phone calls from when you had first gone into the call taking position?
I had my trainer. I remember at one point her just taking her headset off and putting it down because for some reason Toronto's a large center, right? Like
Yeah.
and I had calls from people I knew, like, you know, family members or friends of family members, or I'd be like, and you're trying to do the whole like you're being professional, not that they know my voice, you know what I mean? So and
Right. Yeah.
she's like, I've been doing this job for however long. She's like, I've never ever taken a call from somebody I know. The other thing is I attracted um, my first holdup was at a sex shop. Like it never failed. I got calls that were like, and she like that's when she just put her headset down. She's like, "What do you attract?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't want to be attracting like, like this is not what I want to be attracting."
Oh my Lord.
So I do remember I had some really unusual calls. I was very lucky that um, I, you know, yeah, I had hard calls, you know, I
Mhm.
absolutely, but I try to remember the absolutely ridiculous ones. You know what I mean? Like
Right. Of course.
right? Because, you know,
I'm Suzanne, I have got to say that out of over 500 episodes, almost 600 episodes, I think yours is the first one about one of the earlier calls being a robbery from a sex shop.
yeah. So, well, there you go. My
So
first podcast, way to
I
break
know.
the ice for myself.
That is amazing. Do you
So,
I mean, I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you remember what they were like? Were they stealing actual, items, or were they
I,
robbing the place? Like, were they taking money?
as far as I remember, it was money. It was a little it was in the downtown core of Toronto.
Mhm.
Like so it was yeah, it was a little like cuz it's your first holdup too, right? Like
Right?
it's your first it was my first robbery in progress. So I'm like and she's just like yeah, so I don't know, I should
So
reach out to her and say like, "Hey, Sally, do you remember what?"
I know, right? So it sounds like, and there's a lot of folks that I have met, there are this specific type of person in dispatch. You were the shit magnet. It's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
You were collecting a lot of, how, diverse calls.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was with Brantford Fire, so I did a year with Brantford Fire covering
Mhm.
maternity parental leave, and it got to the point where they'd be going in for the night. They'd be like, "Don't shit the bed, okay, Suzanne?" Like they don't like. Sorry, that was bad timing. So sorry. But because it was the ridiculous amount of yeah, it's a bit of a
Wow.
you know the little Winnie the Pooh. I'm just a little black green cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. But
See, and I would, if I was working with you, I would be Piglet on the side going,
okay.
"Oh, dear." Oh, man.
So,
That is so, okay, I always loved working with the magnets
yeah.
because I don't know what your schedule was, and so I'll just go ahead and ask you, did you work mostly days, or was it midnights, and also was it 8 hours, 12 hours? What was the schedule like?
So, every department I've worked with, we rotate because yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm curious about that end of it too because it seems like whenever you see like TV shows and stuff like that in the States, it's always like you can't tend to be on one schedule. Where here with all three departments that I've worked with, so police it was a 5 week cycle.
Mhm,
You did your days, afternoons, and nights. So your days were 7 a.m. to 2 p.m.
mhm.
Afternoons were 2 p.m. to 10:30. No, 10. It's been a long time. Like, and or maybe it was no, it was 10:30, and because we had a 15-minute overlap for parade, so you would come
Oh,
in.
okay.
So technically, the shift would go to say like 7 to 2:15 technically, but and then the afternoon would be in at 2, and because they had that 15-minute overlap for parade kind of thing, right?
Mm,
And then the night shifts were I think it was 10:30 to 7. So they were like 8 3/4 hours, something like that. Maybe that's not.
Dang.
But they did, and then we did the long part though about that was we did 8 days in a row, days and yeah. So I might be remembering the shift itself not quite right. Sorry about that. Days and afternoons were 8 days each, and then our nights were 7 days. So you would do like a Thursday to Thursday and then be off. Yeah. I can't remember that one quite as well. I probably blocked that one out.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there's probably a lot of stuff going on. And
um,
so,
yeah, but with both fire departments, our day shifts were 10-hour days and our
mhm,
night shifts were 14-hour nights. With Mississauga, we were on a 4-week cycle. And then with Brantford, it was 4 days on, 4 off, 4 nights, 4 off, 4 days, 4 off, 4 nights. They just did that cycle. But the one with Mississauga, we did 4 days. It was actually, I really like that one. It was 4 days. Then we were off for basically 4 nights. And then I'd have to look at the calendar again. And then I forget how many was off. And then we did a split. So you did Friday, Saturday, Sunday day shift, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night shift. And then it would fall into that 4-week cycle. So that one was pretty good. That was a pretty good shift. The nights were long, and especially because I commuted, it was like an hour plus each way.
oh man.
So I wasn't the nicest on night shift. It took me a few years to realize how grumpy I get when I'm tired.
Well, working the long hours, but also having a long commute like that can be, again, like a blessing and a curse as well, because I remember some of those nights. So at the central dispatch, I worked 12 hours. And when I was at the single seat PD, it was 8 hours. And it was kind of the same where it changed like every 2 weeks. And ours though was 6A to 2P, 2P to 10P, and then 10P to 6A. And when you were on the midnight shift, you stayed on that shift for almost a month, and then you went to mornings. So then when I went to the central dispatch and was working the 12 hours, I lived about 45, 50 minutes away from the center. So having a hard long day, I would have that time to kind of decompress, but I could always tell how much it impacted me whether I was listening to music or not. So, like, sometimes I would be even when I was listening to music, sometimes it would, but mostly if I was listening to music, I was processing it a bit better. Otherwise, it was just me and silence all the way home. And sometimes I would get into that autopilot where you end up getting to a certain point going home and you're like, how did I even get this far? And I would get home and I would look around my car to make sure there was like no dents, like, I didn't hit an animal or a tree or, mailbox or something on the way home because you were so focused into, I guess, really your feelings, like what happened that day. Um, but did you enjoy working a certain shift more than the other? Like for me, it was always midnights. Like I loved midnights, but especially because um there was so much more stuff that was going on. I guess different types of calls. The incident types were the same, but the situation was always different. And sometimes that moment that you thought you took the most outrageous one, nope. The universe says, "Hold my beer," and here comes another one. You're like, "Holy hell!"
Yeah. I I think I don't know that I had a preference to the shift
Hmm.
so much. Yeah, I think I don't really recall having a preference. What I found a huge part though was your coworkers.
Hmm.
That was kind of what would make it or break it. You know what I
For
mean? Like
sure, yeah.
that really impacted how a night was going to go. So, like if I really was loving the night shifts, there was a good chance that it's because I was working with a really good shift, right? Like, because they
Yes,
really,
exactly.
because you could work a 4-hour shift that if it's with the wrong people, it's gonna feel
Yes.
like it's gonna feel like you're putting in a full 24, never mind 4, right? And
Right.
then
Yeah.
you can have other. I remember we worked. It was it was December 21st, 22nd, because my birthday is the 23rd. So that's kind of why it sticks in
Oh,
my
okay.
head. And we had this major storm come through, and it was crazy. It was nuts. And we were still doing like a shift Christmas dinner. Right. And somehow we managed to get it in. It was just chaos, but it was so great. You know what I mean? Because it
Yes.
was just like we were working, it was nonstop. And I mean, even the trucks weren't resting, right? But it was, you had all that camaraderie, and it really makes or breaks the job. It really does. Who you
For
have
sure.
sitting beside you it really makes or breaks the job. So for sure. So
Those are those great moments when you are all just kicking ass and taking names, and you look up at the clock and you're like, "Holy crap, the shift's almost done," to where, like you were saying, to your point, a 4 hour, even a 4 hour, even a 2 hour, hell,
yeah,
sometimes, when you're in there and it's folks that are just like not really there, you look up, you've been doing some crazy stuff and you look up and you're like, "It's only been 10 minutes.
yeah,
It's only been 10 minutes." Like,
yeah.
we're gonna be here
I'm gonna
forever.
sit in the corner and chew on my hair. Like, I can't believe this is what it's going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you've got those chairs where, like, the armrest, you can see the pieces pulled
Yeah,
up
yeah,
and the sponge pieces pulled up. You're like, "Oh, that must have been a crazy shift." Like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, man. So if as long as you feel, comfortable sharing, of course, a call that, maybe kinda sticks with you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think for most of us, there's a few, right?
Mhm,
The one that probably impacted me um, the hardest to some, the hardest, like as far as a trickle down effect, where um, I know it rewired me.
mhm,
I know that I've had experiences since that. I know that that experience is a result of that call. Um, it was when I was working for Mississauga Fire, and we had, it was an industrial fire, and it came in just like, it was just after 4 in the morning, right? Like it came in as an alarm call, and it was like, alrighty. And then, you know, first truck gets on scene, and it's like, okay, there's water showing. All right. So we upgrade it. And it just escalated really quickly. It ended up being a 3 alarm call. But so for us, that was the equivalent of what we would put out for a single structure fire,
mhm.
tripled, right? So that's, um, there were multiple explosions. We had maydays. We had a wall collapse. We had 4 firefighters severely injured. And there were other injuries, right? It was, it was a very impactful call for our entire department, and even for surrounding, as far as like the police and paramedics and stuff like that as well. It was um, those 4 firefighters all survived. None that I know of ever went back to um, uh, full career firefighter again. One of them tried, but it wasn't the right fit anymore. It
Mhm.
was kind of, but yeah. So it was 10 years ago. It was April 23rd, 2014, and yeah. So I continued to work after that call. I remember, like, it was a night shift, right? So we got off shift at 7 was our changeover. And so that was a lot in 3 hours, right? And so my relief came in, went home, tried to sleep as much as you can, came back in the next day. And we don't typically, unless you're super short staffed, you're not typically dispatching the same desk right afterwards, right? But I was like, nope, it's my call. They were like, there was somebody else assigned to the desk. I'm like, it's my call. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just feel
Right,
like
yeah.
it's my call. I'm back. I need to finish this out, right? Because So our entire shift was very lucky. We had a very good district chief, and he came up and made sure that we all filled out exposure reports, actually. And I'm not sure we're very lucky in Canada. I will speak specifically to like Ontario, in that dispatchers are classified as first responders, right? And I know that's part of, I believe, where you started really doing a lot of work, is just to get that classification, or to get, and so we're very lucky and fortunate. And so that was why that district chief made sure that we filled out exposure reports too, because he's like, you guys have been exposed. Like, you guys, it might be a different injury, but you need to write out that. And so fast forward, so that was 2014. I continued to work. Eventually, even too, I went through a promotional process and was promoted. And then come 2016, we had some family stuff go on. And then 2017, like June 2017, I went off work in May of 2017. And my last day, I didn't know it was my last day. It was one of those, like, it was kind of funny, ironic funny, because two coworkers approached me on that day, and they were like, Suzanne, one of them was like, I haven't heard you laugh in a long time, right? Like, are you taking care? And, and then the other one was like, if you're having a hard time, like, have you thought about taking some time off work, right? And and I was like, I'm like, actually, well, covered. I'm going to see the city shrink tomorrow. Because I had a very good supervisor, and she had asked me if she wanted me to make the appointment in that for me. And I was like, yeah. So, so that was my last day of work, and you didn't know it at the time. So that's been a lot that I still struggle with. It's not having that closure, not having that, oh, this is the last time I'm going to dispatch, or this is, you know what I mean? Excuse
Right.
me. So, so I ended up with a PTSD diagnosis, and which was covered under our workplace safety and insurance board. That ended up being a whole other story. That would, because sometimes, even though we have the protection, it doesn't always go as smoothly as you would kind of hope or like, because it's not a cut and dry injury, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
it's not I've got a broken limb, or I've got a workplace cancer, or it's not as easily. So yeah, but it's
So I love the fact that, and thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing, your story. I know it's not an easy thing to do, but to have the courage to do so, that is what it's all about. So thank you very much for sharing that. I what I was gonna say about how I started, I love the fact that you had coworkers
yeah.
that saw this, but also that you were, I guess, willing, and maybe you didn't know it at the time, maybe subconsciously, like, because the reason I say this is because I've used this as a metaphor before with an incident that happened to me on a plane, where I couldn't hear where this person was trying to help us, everyone on the plane. I was on a plane that was making an emergency landing. We were literally going down, and she was singing, Yes, Jesus Loves Me, and it seemed like she was singing it for everyone, but I couldn't hear her at the time because I had my headphones on. It wasn't until I actually took my headphones off and allowed that to come in that I was able to feel some comfort. So in that sense, what I mean is that I feel like sometimes a lot of us, when we're not maybe fully ready and we don't realize it at the time, we have those metaphorical headphones on,
Mhm.
or headset rather, where we can't hear other people who are like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" Because what is it that we say sometimes when we're not ready? We're like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm fine. Everything is fine." Like, I was the same way.
Yeah.
I buried my calls, but at this point, you already were listening. You were listening to these folks, and like you said, you didn't know it was going to be your last day. And I can understand that closure piece, right, as well. Um, More so because it wasn't, I guess, in a sense, really in your own terms, right?
No,
And
exactly.
and then
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
you go in and this ends up happening, and that was it. But
Yeah.
I'm happy and proud of you that you did go, because there's a lot of folks like us that they don't end up going, and they end up kind of crashing on themselves. And a lot of times, like when we're not listening to our own body or whichever, it takes our body to make us listen, to finally listen. And that point, it's like, clawing to get back to the top, whatever top that might be. And so from that point, like you start going to, I guess, sessions, right? And you start talking and you get this diagnosis. Where did you go from there? Was it more so just kind of you, with another person, right, that you're talking to? But a lot of times it's us kind of facing ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
trying to get through that process. Is that kind of what you went through, or how did that
Well,
go?
no, unfortunately, the process from that last day and then some
Hmm.
ended up being a real struggle. The I did not have a good experience with the city psychiatrist. It um, Unfortunately, I was there. I'm like, I am asking you for help. I
Hmm.
am worried I'm going to fuck up a call. That's the nightmare as a dispatcher, right? Like
Oh, of course.
you're going to fuck up a call and someone's going to die because of you, right?
Hmm.
And he told me I was very strong, and it's taken me a lot of years to be able to deal with that word, like because I'm you know,
Yeah.
and he was like, you have an adjustment disorder, and here's here's a prescription for these pills, and it was lorazepam, and this is after because I had been I was angry. I was so angry. That's where I was at that point, like before, where they'd start. Like I was rage angry regularly, and I was drinking a lot, and so here I was in his office, and I was telling him these things, and now he's giving me a prescription that's known to cause addiction, that's known to. So where I did end up getting help was my family nurse practitioner. She'd been part of our life, like she'd been our family's care provider for quite a few years. And I walked in there, and she was like, I've been waiting for this. Like she had seen it coming, and she's like, this is what we're going to do instead. So I was very lucky that I had her, that she, there was a lot of back and forth with my EAP and trying to get the right therapy care. And eventually I ended up having to find somebody on my own. And she was fantastic. And I did EMDR, not specifically, but about other stuff. And
Hmm.
that, I cannot say enough about that. For me, it was really healing in a lot of ways. It really helped with a lot. And I really think it's important that we are all given the right and a way to choose our healing, because the prescriptive ways that many places are still looking at for healing isn't necessarily the right fit for everybody.
Right.
Like I had a method that finally was helping me sleep, but the bureaucratic part of where I worked, they wanted to see me on pills. And it was like, I don't want to be on the pills. Like, and pills are great.
Right.
Like, no, sorry, that was the wrong phrasing. Pills are great. Like,
No, I know what you meant. I'm sure everybody knows what you mean.
like, there was a point where I did need the help of
Mhm.
medication to be able to get to a different level of healing. So there's
Right.
absolutely, but sleeping wasn't one of them. Like that wasn't, I was able to find a more natural way for me to sleep. It involved a weighted blanket. It involved having not like nature music playing in the background. It involved having darkness over my eyes, and it involved using like an essential oil. That's how I was able to get safe sleep, to rest my body, to start healing, right? And so I think that's an important thing, that there seems to be more and more awareness of different modalities
Mhm.
that people can find, and that I think we're all a little different. We all have a combination of different things that will help us with our healing. So yeah,
I agree, and I'm in the same. I feel the same exact way. I have nothing against medications. I think for some folks that's the way to go, and but for others it's not always the way to go. And just to be throwing stuff at people sometimes, it's like, let's get to the root cause, instead of putting a band-aid on it. And there are some folks that just they're not the right fit for those in public safety. It's not always the same
yeah,
thing. Again, for some it might work, for others it might not. And I think what's awesome here, and why conversations like this are so important, and you sharing your story as well, is for people to know that it's okay to switch to a different person if the first person isn't working for them. Because just as an example, when I was in dispatch, my team and I, we had gone in for a counseling session with the county's EAP that they provided, and just we tell the person what happened, and the first thing that the person asks is, "Well, how does that make you feel?" And we're just like, "Oh, right." I mean, there was no other. That was just like the first thing. But also, we kinda said to the person, "You're probably amazing at what you do, but I don't know if you're the right fit for us, especially because you don't come from public safety." And the guy said too, he's like, "You're right. I'm probably not the best for you because I don't understand what you do or any
yeah,
of it." So we ended up going to someone else who actually comes from the chair, who under the headset, and was a
mhm,
lot better fit for all of us. So, yeah, I think it's very important for people to know, like, if this first person doesn't feel right, it's okay to go to the next person. You're not gonna hurt their feelings
no,
because they're gonna they're gonna go to the next client as well. And if the second person doesn't work, after a while, then find someone else until you really find someone that fully fits. And also, like you were saying, other methods, if the medications or whatever aren't really working or what you want to do, there are other methods out there, and it is okay to just really explore and find what is right for you.
yeah, yeah, and it can change too, right? Like what's working, it may be, this is what's working right now, and then I'm going to add something, or I'm going to take something away, and then, you can play around because where you are, and to know that, like, there are still times I'm like, even actually, funny enough, last night I was like, I think I might need to pull out my weighted blanket. It's been a while, but just knowing that today, as excited as I was to
Yeah,
come and chat with you,
right.
just knowing that, okay, I was gonna be opening up some doors probably, like
Yeah.
so, like so
Right,
to know
exactly.
you can reach back in, and you have these different tools, and yeah, that,
Yeah, and there's no shame in it, there's no judgment or anything like that. We're like years and years and years ago where the culture was different. It was like, I'm afraid to say something because someone is gonna think this, or that fear was there, that stigma was there, and in a lot of places it still is. But again, as I was saying, conversations like this, that's why it's important, so that people can hear these things and be inspired and motivated to get their own help as well, because their story will end up helping someone else later on. That's how we keep this good cycle going versus the vicious cycle of the lack of a better way to put it, just kind of the old guard, the way
yeah,
that thought process was before, that mindset.
yeah,
It's a new day, damn it. Like, we're doing things and we are opening up, and people are actually healing. That's a form of closure as well, and healing, but also the way we're doing it here through the power of storytelling. So
yeah,
that as well. So I have to imagine that, everything that you went through has now brought you to where you are at now, as well as the owner of Finding Your Path Coaching. Please tell me about this.
yeah. So I completed my coaching certification. It's been a year now.
Mhm.
And so I work with first responders, and one of the things I'm passionate about is like you said, you have to be the right fit, right? Like I'm
Mm.
not for everybody. I'm not like, And I find even for anyone out there looking for peer support can be so helpful. Like peer support is wonderful, but that's also, this is one of these times where we really have to be our own advocate. And if you find yourself, I have run into that as well, where I've been like, yeah, we're not the same. Like, and part of me felt guilty for being like, no, but I couldn't, there was still so much anger, and I have lived that anger.
Mhm.
And I knew that that's something else that we have to be aware of, is that as human beings, we pick up on each other. And sometimes, like, and I think probably dispatch is a good place that you can see that, like, you'll get those miserable shifts. It's a horrible thing to say, but you'll get those, and there'll just be an entire group of people, but it's because part of that is just that energy, right? It's so just, and it's not it's not to have that like toxic positivity kind of thing at all, but it's just to know that we have the right to find happiness. We have the right to be angry. There's healthy places for anger. Anger is telling us something. Like, what is my anger telling me right now, versus living in that anger, right? So
Right.
one of the things that I really tend to be called to is people who are in a transition state in their careers. And I really believe that, like, sometimes when we realize our future, the future we were working towards, it's not an option anymore. Something happens, and that future is not an option anymore. We have to be able to check in with that loss of identity. It's a real thing, right? Like, you can have that loss of identity, bringing awareness to that, and giving ourselves permission to envision a brighter future. It was just this past April that I myself realized one of my injuries from that Thamesgate call. It was on the 10-year anniversary of it, and I was visiting my dad in Ontario. I was driving home to Nova Scotia, and I'm like, holy fuck, it wasn't my fault. Like, duh, like, you know what I mean? But all
Right.
of a
Yes.
sudden, I'm like, I didn't set the fucking fire. It was not my fault. Like, it was all of a sudden this awareness that I'd been carrying all this time, like, as if I was the one responsible. Like, I'd carried this for 10 years, this responsibility. And all of a sudden I was like this lifting, like, of, it wasn't my fault. I did the best I could. I was not the cause of the injury to those firefighters. I was not the cause of the injury to, I wasn't the source. Like, and to be able to just release that was just huge. Like, there's still obviously lots of layers. like,
Right. Yeah.
like,
But
but
that,
that was this huge, like, aha moment. And
right.
it's a duh moment for some people. Like, yeah, you weren't the one who set the fire, but that's not how the brain works sometimes, right?
Right.
So with my coaching, that's kind of primarily where I seem to be working, is with people who are trying to figure out that transition point. What I have a passion towards is, and I've been working on creating a workshop for training, is I really believe that if we worked on our mental health resiliency as much as we work on so many other things in these career paths, firefighters train repeatedly on how to approach fires. As dispatchers, as call takers, we practice repeatedly how to take suspect descriptions. Can you imagine if from day one, part of our practice is putting into practice ways to keep our mental health, like ways to, here are ways, like, and the right, it's not the same for everybody. Some people love meditation, but what if you've never been exposed to meditation? Can you imagine if part of the call taking classes is the first 5 minutes of every day, we're just going to sit in silence? Or, after you have a call, you're going to practice, or we've listened. Like, I don't know if you guys got to listen to any calls, like, to kind of prepare you. So it's like, okay, we're going to play some calls that are harder. Now we're going to have you write about them. Like just write it out, write it out, write it out, so that the rewiring is going onto the page, not into our brains, right? Like so that we don't have to. And so that's what I really, that's a passion I have, and that's what I see moving forward. What I would really love to do is start working in that field, like as far as doing workshops with departments, when they have their training days, going in and talking to people about this, but also the pre-start. Like, let's set up a program pre-start. Let's do an assessment. We do all these health assessments. What condition is that is John in before he becomes a police officer or a paramedic or a firefighter? We have all these markers, but we don't have enough, I think, in the way of like where we are, with our mental health. Like one of the things you said in your open mic was like, where are you feeling on a scale of 0 to 10, right? Or a scale of 1 to 10. Why not have that acknowledgement, to give different processes available, because it is not a one size fits all. But if we can start having that conversation about, here are different things. I'm a big breathing, practicing your breathing. It's something we carry with us. I know one of the big things that is often touted is coming into like your 5 senses, right? However, that you can hear, that you can see, that those kind, like to bring you back in your body. That one doesn't work for me. My senses are what set me off. When I hear things, that's what sets me off, because that's it's our ears, it's our hearing. That was our whole career. Like that was my whole career, right?
Right.
So that is a trigger point for me. But my breathing, if I can focus in and get my breathing under control, and I can recognize and I can give that message to my body, I am safe. Everyone around me is safe. And just get that back under, like that for me, like, and that's something I carry. And if we practice that a few times a day, right from the get-go, I really think it could be a game changer for a lot of people. It won't save everyone. It won't save all,
Right,
but
yeah.
if it's one person that gives them that extra chance, I just think it's, so anyways.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. That is very important. And I have got this 8-hour communications course that I teach, and there's a part in there where, because I do my Imagine Listening in that as well, which is peer support session. Really, what we're doing is it's a back to basics on communication, where we can bridge the gap between new dispatchers as well as seasoned dispatchers, or even seasoned in season. Because to me, the biggest thing is we sometimes forget where we started, and that's where the eating our young comes in. If we could just use our powers, so to speak, because we're empaths, right? And we're doing
Yeah.
this every day with callers. Why can't we do it with each other and build that type of culture? So one of the things that I have in there also is about breathing techniques. The last about year and a half or so that I was in dispatch, I really got into meditation. I also got into yoga, which something I never thought I was going to do, and also breathing techniques. Like I got good enough at breathing techniques that I could be in a hard call and like breathing through it, and I would be able to figure that out. And when I was done with it as well, I would be able to center myself right after the call.
Yeah.
So yeah, after the call, I would be able to center myself just through breathing techniques, or even if I had time, of course, right after the call, I would be able to just kind of do a quick, like 1 minute even of, box breathing, and it helps so much. So I've been telling a lot of people, you know, get into this more. It might sound like it's bullshit to you, but think about sharpshooters and other folks. Like they're really concentrating on their breathing, and to help them to be able to balance, when they go to take the shot. I don't know if all of them do this, but they'll hold their breath for a
Mhm.
moment and then take the shot. But it's all in your breathing, and it can help do so many things. Like I myself in the beginning, I was like, I don't know that this is going to work. Oh no, it worked. It definitely works. So breathing techniques, man, I am a big proponent of that as well.
Yeah. And there's even some studies now that are showing things like, so for you, like yoga, taking the class, having directions given to you between right and left and movement, actually starts to rewire paths in the brain. So like it's those things, like you do it and they're working and you're like, this is amazing. And then I was like, oh, look, they actually are starting to, have scientific proof of like why
Right.
these things are working, right? Like yoga was it 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 was a game changer for me as well. It was really one of those things that was yeah, it was absolutely powerful. I desperately miss it. I actually teach yoga, but
Mhm.
because we live rurally, there's not a lot of opportunity around, and I so miss going to a class. Like I love where we live. I have a beautiful group of ladies that come out, but yeah, it's one of those things that it's been a while now, and I'm like, and when I heard that little bit, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because that I've been needing to fill my own cup a little bit, and so that
Mhm.
makes sense that my body is craving that being instructed. So I love that you do that with your course. It really, it, I mean, that's making. I have no doubt that's making huge impacts. Like it's yeah, and
It's
even if it's not immediate, it's those little seeds that you're planting.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
it's hilarious when I get to that part because I build up to it, and I'll say, "It's something that I never thought I would
Mhm.
do," and I throw in a seed there by saying, "'Cause I was afraid that I would do a pose wrong," and I will see people, like, perk up, and one person recently was she said out loud, like, it was just an audible, loud, "I know exactly where you're going with this," and I said, "Oh, yeah? Do you?" And she goes, "Yoga, right?" And I was like, "Yep, you beat me to the point to the punch." I was like, "That's exactly right." And then, I would start talking. I would say, it doesn't have to be like, a lot of people when they think about yoga, it's like, I'm gonna be in a pretzel, I'm gonna be
Yeah,
doing these poses that I can't do. And it's like, no, some of these are like the most simple stretches that you would think, oh, that's what this is. It's
yeah,
not like contortionist shit. Like, no, that's not. Like, there's some of the easiest poses that can relieve so much stress. I mean, I'll tell people in this portion of the class, I'll simply tell them, "Look at your posture, look at the way you're sitting, bring your shoulders down," and people will bring them down, they're like, "I didn't even realize."
yeah.
And some
The
of them will
dispatcher shoulder, right? Like
right,
you
yes,
live
yeah,
up
'cause
here.
yes, 'cause you carry all of that pressure there, and then when I tell them, "Just drop it down," there have been a couple times where I've even heard, "Oh," like,
Yeah,
"Oh, wow," yeah, like it seems like bullshit, but it's not,
yeah.
and it really does help. So, I love everything that you're doing, and I thank you again for coming on and sharing your story. It's been an honor to have you on. For those who wanna know more, as we go into the wrap-up of this episode, Finding Your Path Coaching, where can people find out more about, what it is that you do, whether it be social media, email, website, whichever? How can they find you?
Yeah. So my email is hello at findingyourpathcoaching.ca, because I'm in Canada.
Right.
I'm available all over, but like I liked the
Right.
.ca. I throw
Yeah.
my U's in there too. Like, and the website is findingyourpathcoaching.ca. I don't really have any social media. I have my own Instagram, which is Finding My Path.
Mhm.
So I do little bits and bobs on there as well, and so always it's open. You're welcome to take a look. Like,
All
so
right, excellent. That is excellent. I'll make sure to add these links and everything to the blog post when the episode comes out. Now, I have one last question
yeah.
for you, and it's one that I didn't send you, but it's one that I ask all of the guests at the end. And so here it is. If you could go back in time, because you've been doing this, you were in dispatch for 18 years or so, and completely about 25, right? Fully in public safety. But if you could go back in time to talk to yourself in the beginning of your career, what would you tell yourself? And it's not to change anything, right? Because as we were saying, a lot of times all of the stuff that we go through lead us to where we are at
Oh
today.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's not to change anything, but if you could go back in time to talk to yourself in the beginning, what would you tell yourself?
The kids grow fast. The kids really grow fast, and work will be there. The kids grow fast. Yeah. So yeah. I've got 4 kids. They're like 15 to 26. And 26-year-old has his own son now. He's 3 years old. So it goes so fast. It's in a blink of an eye. So yeah, make sure that, yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing, is that the job is fantastic. And some of the dearest people I've ever met. And it shaped who I am. It really, really did. And but that's somehow miraculously, I say, because we're both cheap and stubborn, my husband and I are still together. So like we survived through it. But yeah, to make sure that there's the family time in there. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all you're doing. It's fantastic. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And it's been an amazing experience, but it has been an honor to have you on and just hear your story and everything that you're doing. This is awesome. And I know a lot of people are going to be able to relate and be inspired to end up sharing their stories as well, or just opening up and doing more things. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
So I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you, excuse me, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media. You can be a subscriber of the podcast as well, whether it be on Patreon or Facebook. The easiest way to do this is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. And you'll find everything there. You'll find my email, all of my social media, where to follow, where to listen to the latest episode, where to purchase Imagine Listening, the book. And that's volume 2. Volume 1, my version, will be coming out in probably the second week of December. I am busting my ass to get that one out there. So make sure to look for that as well. And if you scroll down further, again, as I mentioned, if you want to be a guest on the show, you'll find a link on there to schedule an episode with me. This is for those who are new to dispatch, seasoned, or retired. I would love to have you on and share your story to literally millions around the world. This is something I've been doing for over a decade now. It is my passion, and I just love it. And it is an honor to be able to share all of your stories. So you can jump on there, schedule an episode. And if you're looking for any dispatch merch or podcast merch, you can find that all the way at the bottom of that as well. And that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital, a leader next gen core services. And shout out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, and especially all of you watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Thank you very much. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live. There are some episodes like Open Mic Live, or some just pieces, just snippets from the podcast that show up on Instagram Reels, as well as TikTok. So you can look for those as well. But to listen 24/7 audio style, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and within the trenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we will see you all in the next one.